Members of the conference committee, this is for House Bill 93 and Senate File 96. I think, Madam Chairman, with your approval, we'll maybe have staff walk us through the differences, and then we've drafted a proposal or an amendment, maybe walk through that to make sure you understand it, to make sure we understand it, and then decide if and what and how you want to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that would be appropriate.
So Dawn or Elizabeth, David, it doesn't matter, flip a coin, and walk us through the summary of amendments, and then let's go through this proposed amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Hopkinson with LSO. Which bill were you addressing first?
Let's go through, let's just go right through the summary.
Okay.
We'll go back and forth if you.
Mr. Chairman, Elizabeth Martineau with the Legislative Service Office. We are going to be working off of the colorful sheet of paper. And this is just a summary of differences between House Bill 1, Senate File 96, and House Bill 93. Of course, House Bill 1 has no impact, so we will skip that first section. The second section is for House Bill 93. The amendments changed in Section 4 on page 49 of the bill. It increased the funding from $30 million to $75 million. In Section 7, after page 53, it moved that funding, for the Board of Control to General Fund from S1, or Water Development Account 1. And it also moved the administration piece. So pardon me on that. The $24,000 is for administration, and the $7.1 million is for the Board of Control. There was also an amendment that had the cloud seeding deleted from the bill. And then there was also an amendment by Senator Hicks that had a technical correction for the mountains, for the capitalization on those.
Elizabeth, we're having trouble hearing you. Would you even come to the dais up front? And then sometimes we read lips a little bit too. So thank you, Elizabeth. And if you could just redo that for us, we'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely happy to. Again, Elizabeth Martineau with LSO. We're working on the colorful sheet of paper. We're starting in the section of House Bill 93. The first item is in Section 4 on page 49 of the bill. The Senate increased it from $30 million to $75 million. In Section 7, this is where you changed and brought in the table, and the funding there for the administration division, it went from $24,000 S1 to $24,000 general fund. And you also, in that same amendment, took $7.1 million for the Board of Control from S1 to general fund. You also added the footnote, updated the footnote number 2 to say that House Bill 93 prevails over House Bill 1 and Senate File 96. You also had 2 amendments that I did not include on this sheet. One for cloud seeding, and that was, I believe, Senator Beitman's amendment to go ahead and take cloud seeding out of the bill. And then you had another amendment that was yours, Senator Hicks, for the mountains, to make sure those were capitalized correctly. And those were the amendments to House Bill 93 by the Senate. Moving on to the next section, that is for Senate File 96. This one had a little bit more, but there was only 3 amendments in the House. So going through, in Section 5 on page 6, this relates to the next one, which is Section 8. And there was that study for, I believe, the Laramie Range. And instead of having those reversions go to the general fund, the House chose to have those reversions go to Water Development 3.
Mr. Chairman, so where are those reversions coming from?
So the original appropriation was from Water Development 1 for the study, and the reversion was supposed to go to the general fund. But this, if there are any. And so now the House has changed that to go to Water Development 3.
So I'm still trying to figure out where the reversions are coming from. Are they reversions from what?
From that appropriation, $500,000 for the study or whatever we appropriated in the original bill, it appropriated the funds, and then it said if there are any reversions, they would go to the general fund. And we're just saying if there are any reversions, they'll go to water. Yeah, the bill already.
In the House Bill 1, or, so,
In the water.
in the water bill, all right. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. And then next, Section 8, there was a change, but this relates to the discussion you just had for Section 5. This is the appropriation for it. Instead of being from general fund, it is from Water Development 3. Next, these are all lines 23 through 28 are tied together. Yes, sir?
I'm not, just a second. I just want to make sure for Senator Hicks. So in that Senate file, we appropriate, the water, Select Water appropriated that 500,000, and it had any remaining appropriation would go
And I'm trying
to,
to remember what the 500,000 was for.
for the Snake River Basin's conveyance loss study,
Oh, okay.
okay? And they had the reversion going back to general fund. We says, no, put it back in water.
Okay.
Why do you want it in 3 instead of 1? Because it came out of 1.
Because we had 3 fingers, maybe, I don't know.
Well, that's true. It's just, it came out of 1.
We thought water 3 was better than general fund.
That is true.
Yeah, it would probably, because those are water account 1 funds for that, would put it back in
Probably
water
put it back
1.
in water 1.
I mean, that's semantics,
Yeah.
because
All
the
right.
commission can move it around anyway.
Fine.
Yeah.
One. Okay, that's fine.
All right.
All right. Our first agreement.
As a confirmation, Madam Chairman, the Section 8, page 11, line 23, you will change that to S1. Thank you. The next set of changes relate to deleting the table and inserting narrative instead. And so the changes in order, we have a new Section 9A that takes $3 million for the Board of Control, and it was previously $7.1 million S1. And then for administration, it takes $12,000, which is half from general fund.
Control, and the position was, it was all in water, it was all in water development 1. Select Water says, no, it should be in general funds. We've split it
Correct,
for this fiscal year.
for this fiscal year. Madam Chairman, moving on, they also included a Section 9E, which says that this bill prevails over the other. Moving further in the bill, in Section 10, which is on page 13, this has to do with the Colorado River Compact. Originally, the House had taken the position to move those funds from general fund to Water Development 3 funds for both the position and the contracting. It is my understanding that that has changed since this sheet was updated. So now it shouldn't show that, it should just be general fund as it was before. Moving on, next we have Section 10, page 13. There was an additional correction to add in as further amended. This was necessary to ensure that those funds would be, once transferred, able to be used and appropriated for those purposes. So that was just a correction to make sure that occurs. Section 11 is a $30 million general fund transfer to the Water Development 3 account. And then finally, Section 12, page 14, was that dollar-for-dollar reduction. It's new narrative relating to House Bill 93. And that is a summary of the differences between the House amendments and the Senate amendments for both bills.
Any questions, I guess, but then I was going to say, then we could go to the amendment and further elaborate on how we massage that and see.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I'm not tracking, but could you please explain the dollar-for-dollar reduction?
So, and I will let Elizabeth correct my errors, but one of the reasons, there's some duplication of funds in the two bills. And we're going to have to end up with two bills clean. And one of the things that we do is where we have duplication of bills, we've got to park them in one or the other. And so this, we'll park them in the Senate file and make the reduction in the House bill. That makes sense. Did I say that right, Elizabeth?
So this, Mr. Chairman, you're saying this bill will control if that's.
No, not necessarily, because there, again, as you well know, you've got your planning, your construction bill, which is the House bill, and then your administration and planning bill. And we're just making sure that they come out clean for the respective intent, and that where we added funds in both bills that done the same thing, we need to make sure that we don't have a duplication there. And so the Senate file is going to control where there's a duplication.
All right, so it'd be a balancer.
Yeah, I guess.
All right. Is that how you'd explain it? All right. Does everyone understand Senator Grew?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question on the Board of Control stuff, the Section 9, the split. You split the money in half from where we were, and all ours was in general fund, and you're splitting a half into, just explain that, and also explain about it's not ongoing, it's just for 1 year, it's not biennialized, it's not ongoing in the budget, so you're saying cut it in half, 50/50 for 1 year? Is that, explain, just a little more.
Madam Chairman and members, so last year's standard budget request had the Board of Control being funded out of Water One for the biennium. Select Water amended it and changed it to coming out of general funds. We had already done the budget process, having it coming out of the Board of Control. So we said, and there's the argument, okay, fair argument, where does it belong? I think there's a significant number of our colleagues that say it belongs in water, significant number that says it should be funded out of general fund. We'll work through that. But in this supplemental budget, we said, okay, fine, we've got some extra dollars this year. We don't think it should come entirely out of general funds. There's a strong position that Select Water feels like it should come out of water or come out of the general funds. And so we're just splitting that. And so we're conceding half from what the standard budget was.
Mr. Chairman, and that would be a normal process, but I would tell you, because of the nature of the accounting for the funding and the way that comes, when we first did this about 7 years ago, this creates a nightmare in the budgeting, because the water accounts have a different process. And I can't remember all the nuanced stuff, but I remember the state engineer office coming to me and said, it just creates a nightmare when you split the funding sources between water and general fund on the accounting and the administration of how those funds work. And so
We're okay with putting them all back into Water One.
I'm sure you are. I would be surprised. Mr. Chair, I'm just laying out that
I
there's
know.
other extraneous issues other than just
fair enough.
splitting the baby.
I just couldn't pass it up. So let's ask.
I just
so
wanted you guys
does
to be aware of that.
So to staff, should that create a problem? If we fund that into, what difficulties is that if the two water sources help us with that?
Mr. Chairman, it very well could create accounting challenges where you have one fiscal year half funded with one source of funds, and you're talking about board travel expenses or associated employees. Do you just split all costs 50/50, in which case that you have to do double accounting entries for each purchase? Or do you spend all of the general funds for 6 months and then all of the water funds for 6 months? It could create some
Duly noted,
challenge.
okay? How do we get around that? So maybe what we consider on some of those others, we says, okay, we funded these out of general fund, maybe we can make that easier. and do something to that effect that we'll come back to that. But,
Yeah, and so that was my,
Yeah,
let's
I know.
have a discussion. If we're going to do one, let's do one. If we're going to do one, do the other.
Okay. All right,
And we can discuss the alternatives to
Yep.
that.
yeah,
Let's
thank
keep
you.
it clean, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions on the? Thanks, I just couldn't.
Mr. Chairman,
And-
no ice cream for you.
I know.
And Mr.
I'm going to
Chairman-
my room. I'm going to my room right now.
Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering why you had a propensity to state the obvious.
My wife says I can't generally even understand the obvious.
Mr. Chairman, Elizabeth has one more amendment for us. It's a cleanup, but we'd like her to explain that while she's in the hot seat. Unless David wants to do it, yeah. All right,
I'm happy to do that.
all right. Whomever, come on down into the front if you would. Thank you, David, and we appreciate this. Good catch on your part.
Madam Chair, as far as the bottom of that, the proposed JCC report goes, the language that it's adding in lines, page 51, line 14, 52, line 9, and 52, line 19, is simply to account for a scenario or to make clear that the appropriation to the account is actually available by being further appropriated to the Water Development Commission to be expended. It would still require approval, in this case, in the amended version of the State Loan and Investment Board, as well as being dispersed by the governor first. So none of that changes. This simply clarifies that this money actually is appropriated to the office.
All right, thank you. Any questions, committee? Questions? Seeing none. Thank you, David.
Elizabeth, you want to walk us through? You were gone, I don't care. You're doing a great job.
Mr. Chairman, I guess we're going to provide multiple staff perspectives on this. Walking through the proposed JCC that the House has prepared, let's first address House Bill 93. So they are proposing to adopt the Senate position, which is really a clarifying.
You said 93. Wait,
Wait a second.
we're confused. Yeah, we're on that one, right? Yeah,
We have 96 in front of us.
no, this is the one they're talking,
Oh, okay.
This
We
one.
just did 93. Yeah,
yeah, all right.
we did 93. Is there further discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay.
He just spoke to the technical or the correction at the bottom. I wanted to at least explain what the House proposes up top.
Okay,
So stepping back, we have two big issues is the way I would describe it. One is how big of a transfer to Water 3? And the second is how to fund the Board of Control and a little bit of the administration in the state engineer's office. Those are the two big issues that I think are outstanding among both bills. And the House proposal moves both of those issues to Senate File 96. So there's no competing language between the two bills. So House Bill 93, under the House proposal, is relatively clean. They adopt the Senate amendment related to the capitalization of the mountain ranges for the cloud seeding. This is really just a grammatical amendment. It does not have much substance to it. Then they are deleting 4 amendments. Senate Standing Committee Amendment number 1 is the table, which moves $7 million for the Board of Control. It's literally taking a portion of the budget and putting it into House Bill 93. Senate Standing Committee Amendment number 2 is the same amendment, except, I believe this was Senator Kinski's amendment, he adds a footnote at the bottom giving the legislative intent that in future budgets, the standard budget would come from the general fund as opposed to Water 1. So, and it deletes Senate Standing Committee Amendment number 1. So you really have the table there and now the footnote for an expectation of future budgets. Senate Second Reading Amendment number 1, this is, I believe, Chairman Steinmetz's amendment, which provides for superseding language, meaning if this bill passes, it will prevail over the budget bill and it will prevail over 96, House Bill, or Senate File 96. And then Senate Third Reading Amendment number 3 is the sunset language on cloud seeding. So essentially, they're eliminating all 4 of those amendments and electing to address Board of Control and the amount of transfer to Water 3 in this next bill. And then at the bottom of the page, further amend as follows. I think Mr. Hopkinson described this as a corrective language. Not between the two positions, but corrective language. So really, they are going back to the House position with a change on the capitalization of the mountain ranges, correction amendments as to the 2 appropriations from Water 1 and Water 2 appropriations from Water 2 and 1 appropriation from Water 1 for those projects that were adopted last year, and moving all of the other issues to the next bill.
Madam Chairman, one of the guiding principles for us moving that over into the Senate file is just the title of the bill, where the House bill was simply water bill construction. The other, a water bill planning and administration, is more inclusive of the issues we're trying to deal with. So just trying to keep it in there.
So Dawn, help me out here with, so the standing committee amendment, the first one that was deleted by the House, that also had the appropriation of raising that appropriation to 75 million, is that correct? I didn't catch that in the deletions, but if we revert back to the House position on House Bill 93, as that came over, I believe there was a 30 million appropriation in there, and then the Senate Standing Committee amendment raised that to 75. But that's now deleted.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
All right. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not saying there is agreement or should be agreement, but they're basically, this one is relatively clean, and it pushes off the decisions to this next bill, which I will walk through. This is the proposed amendment, Senate File 96, Joint Conference Committee report, and it is proposed by the House. And I will walk through, in this case, they are adopting the House Third Reading Amendment. The House Third Reading Amendment, as was described by Ms. Martineau and was sponsored by Chairman Eklund, who is here, is also cleanup language. It is the same cleanup language that you have in the House Bill 93 report. And what happens here is these are 2-stage appropriations, is what I call them. A good example is when we're dealing with water, they like to spend from the water account, even if it's generally funded for the reasons that Senator Hicks previously described. So every appropriation really requires 2 actions, an appropriation from the general fund to one of the water accounts, and a second appropriation from the water accounts for the purposes of the expenditure. And you'll see that with a lot of our capital construction projects. For example, the state hospital or the WLRC, we appropriated general funds to that CapCon account, and then we needed a second appropriation from the CapCon account. So House Third Reading Amendment number 1, sponsored by Chairman Eklund, is solely a cleanup related to that 2-stage appropriation in the administration and planning bill. And then they are electing to delete, the House is proposing to delete their other 2 amendments. The first amendment is primarily rewritten here in this delete and further amend on this same page. And this is their approach to funding a portion of the Board of Control, that 3.5 million.
Which line and what page and line on that, Don?
So
Further amend, so are we on page 6, line 24?
correct, and specifically, all of that language is essentially in the House Standing Committee Amendment number 1, which is being deleted, except for they remove all of their superseding language as well. So just like the Senate did, they had these one-for-one reductions, and this bill supersedes this bill. They get rid of all of that. And the reason for that is, if we get rid of it in House Bill 93, and it's already cleaned up in the House, in the budget bill, we can just make one decision here as to how much to appropriate for the Board of Control and how much to deposit in Water 3.
So Don and members, so as you look at this 500,000, this is the second part of the appropriation. If you go over on page 11 to section 8, that's where we get the original 500,000 from, I believe. And so we take it in section 8, appropriate it to Water Development 1, and then in this one that we're looking at right now is where you take that those same funds and appropriate it to be used for this study. Do I have that accurate, Don?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be honest, I didn't quite follow it, but your
So if
colleagues
you
do.
go, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, if you go to section 8 on page 11, that's where we transfer $500,000 from the general fund to Water Development 1. That's where we take this money that is showing up on page 6. We parked it in 1, and then on page 6, we're then further appropriating it to be used for the study.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on that. So, page 6, line 24, we're deleting the general fund, so, and we're saying it's going to come out of Water 3 now, is that correct?
No, so, Madam Chairman, are you on page 6, line 23 and 24? And I may be getting ahead of myself, and I want to be careful.
Mr. Chairman?
Just a second, please.
Yes.
Okay, page 6. Page 6 is the reversion, correct?
No, page 6 does a couple of things, Madam Chairman. Section 5, we take this appropriation that comes from Water 1, and we allow it to be expended for the transfer, for the study. Is that accurate? Okay, but where did we get that 500,000 from that's in Water 1? If you go to page 11, in the section 8, we're working with that. That's where we take it from the general fund and park it in Water 1 for that study.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just what Don was referring to this two steps to to effectuate the action. So in the first, and it just is funky because it comes a few pages later, but if you were to read the bill backwards in this regard and start on page 11, general fund appropriates money to Water 1 for this, and then you read, because we're reading backwards, then we go back from page 11 back to page 6, and we spend the money on page 6 in section 5. That's all. That's why it in section 5. That's why it says it comes from account 1. That's where we're spending it from, because on that page 11 we put it in there. Again, it's just to that Don's point of it takes two actions to get be able to have it available and then spend it.
Thank you, and I'm just wanting to make sure that we're tracking that, is in case we have to come back to that amount, we're not thinking that it's two different amounts and it's the same dollar.
No,
And then,
it's the 500,000 general fund goes into account 1, and then we have to appropriate it out
Exactly.
of account 1.
And
That's
the-
all this does.
Yeah, and then, Madam Chairman, at the bottom of
So the
section,
question, Mr.
Let me
Chairman,
just-
okay, go ahead.
yeah, then at the bottom of section 5 is that reverting component that we talked about and already agreed Instead of going to water 3, we're going to put it in water 1.
Right, but I guess my question still is here in the section 8 that we're deleting on page 11, lines 23 through 26, and I'm sorry if I'm missing something here. It says there is appropriate, we took out the section that said they shall transfer 500,000 from the general fund to Water 1, and we're putting in, there's appropriated 500,000 from Water Development 3 into the account. So it looks to me like we're changing the funding source. Is that
That's
correct?
That is correct. That is
Okay,
correct.
that's what I needed
Yeah,
to know.
that's
Thank you.
correct. Okay, Senator Hicks.
No,
Okay.
I'm with you.
Don, we got ahead of you. I apologize.
No problem. Let me rewind a little bit and go back up the page on the proposed Joint Conference Committee report. And I have not spoken to House Second Reading Amendment number 1, which is the last item that is being deleted. That's the House version of the one-to-one reduction, dollar-for-dollar reduction, and the superseding language. So they're eliminating that, just doing it straightforward once. And now we are in the language that says further amend the engrossed copy as follows. And I think you've spoken about the first 2 lines, page 6, line 24 and line 25. And I believe the House has receded from their proposal for that to be Water 3 and would like that to go back to Water 1, if I'm understanding the House
Correct.
position correct. And then page 11, lines 23 through 26, Madam Chair, was exactly correct. The Senate's position is that this 500,000 come from the general fund. The House proposal is that this 500,000 come from Water 3. So a difference there. And then finally, page 12 at the bottom of the first page of the proposed report is the House approach to compromise with the funding for the Board of Control. And they're using $3.56 million from the general fund. And if you go back to the budget that was adopted last year, that would mean the other half, because it's about a $7 million appropriation per year, would remain funded from Water 1. You don't see that in this amendment, but that's, how it works. Subsection B to section 9 indicates that the state engineer shall revert any funds to Water 1 because they won't need it with that general fund appropriation, and they don't want to over appropriate. For example, give $10 million for the Board of Control for fiscal year 24. So that's reversion language at the end of this fiscal year. Subsection C does the same thing, but a very small amount of money. The Senate's position was to move $24,800 for administration in the state engineer's office to the general fund. The House position cut that in half and said, we'll do half general funds, half Water 1, and the language in C and D effectuates that purpose. I don't want to speak for the House, but this is one approach that avoids bringing in a table from the budget bill and putting it in standalone legislation. It effectuates the same outcome in a little different way. What it does not fix is, to Senator Hicks's point, you are still funding Board of Control with 2 different revenue sources. And finally, on the bottom of page 2 to the proposed Joint Conference Committee report, page 14 after line 6, this is where they're proposing $30 million be transferred from the general fund to Water 3. Now, recognize that the select committee, I believe, had 50 million. The House position then was 30 million, and I think the Senate's position back in a different bill was 75. So there's some differences there. The framework for this, however, gets rid of multiple bills where this occurs and allows for the discussion to appear right here. Okay, what's the amount? And we don't have any of that superseding or precedent-setting language that if this bill passes first or gets signed first. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, by doing this, the bill itself can be effective immediately. Under the Senate position, you had split effective dates because of the fiscal year and bringing in the budget.
So, Madam Chairman, if you don't mind, and I know that we haven't heard, but I think Senator Hicks's point on those funds is valid. And if you could just let us go visit about that, see if there's an approach we can do to correct that, because we're not trying to make an accounting problem for them. So give us 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay, and then we come back
just
and
slip over.
further discuss.
We'll come back and further discuss, but I think we'll want some time to absorb everything we've talked about today, too.
So the net effect for us is a reduction of $48.5 million between the two bills from the Senate position. I don't think that's gonna happen. No. It's just a start.
Could we,
It's a start. We gotta start.
go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
We've kind of scratched our head on that, and you guys haven't had a chance to digest the amendment, so if you want to take some time and look at that and come back with thoughts and where we need to be, that'd be great.
So, Madam Chairman. Go ahead. Are my colleagues in the House willing to provide a little antacid while I digest that?
We are, we'll see. We have ice cream sandwiches.
And it's not to say that I have heartburn over the amendment, but I got heartburn over the amendment. But anyway, let us digest it and come back. I think that's a good idea, Mr. Chairman, is to come back. You guys have made an offer. I appreciate that. You know, we've worked a few things out. I think this really clarifies, there's really two issues we have to resolve. Is that the way you see it, Mr. Chairman? And so let us go work this. Would you guys like to get back better this afternoon upon adjournment, and we'll see if we can move the ball a little
So
further?
let's suggest this, just not having a feel how it's going to go on our third reading amendments. Let's say if we are done before 5, we'll meet on adjournment, and if not, let's do it at 8 in the
AM in
morning.
the morning? Perfect.
That sounds
Okay.
good, and
That
we'll
work?
get something proposed.
Yeah, that way one body's not waiting on the other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Even if you guys will still work, and we'll shoot you something back that you guys can digest overnight.
okay.
yeah, just,
All right.
All right, we're adjourned.
just have staff get it that way.
We will, yep. All right, this conference committee is adjourned. Thank you.